Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Half Hour Call, the podcast where we talk about all things live, theater, TV, film, basically entertainment in general. I am Rich Kless and I am your host. Today, our guest is a director, choreographer, and community arts educator. He's a graduate of University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where he studied contemporary dance and ballet. Over a 15-year career, he has worked with acclaimed dance artists, including Rosie Herrera, Sidra Bell, Camille A. Brown, David Parsons, Clay Taliaferro, Sean Sullivan, Diane Markham, and Brenda Daniels. In 2008, he founded TECHMOJA Dance and Theater Company as an inclusive and diverse dance and theater company. His work has been supported by the New England Foundation for the Arts, Alternate Roots, Arts Council of Wilmington, and the International Association of Blacks in Dance. His company, TECHMOJA, embodies vision as an artist by creating space where those who may not be able to apt to contribute to the public conversation verbally can do so physically and visually. TECHMOJA was born from a multi-year partnership between himself and his mother, Donna Joyner Green, an arts administrator and culture bearer. The two forged a unique collaboration that continues to influence the evolution of the group and its growing audience today. More recently, TECHMOJA had expanded its reach by collaborating with a variety of partners and presenters to create exposure to the arts, especially among urban and rural youth of color. Please welcome Kevin Levi Green. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, you get the first question everybody gets. What made you want to become an entertainer? Go back to the beginning.
Wow. Okay. When I was told, because I can't quite remember, but when I was about 3, I used to uh, create puppets, like stick puppets.
Okay.
Um, and I would set up the video camera,
Hmm.
and I had my own show. And I would record those. And unfortunately, I was never able to see them because years later we had a house fire, so those videos burned. But I they said I started there, and so then I would just get kids in the neighborhood. I would write these scripts, and I would invite them to my famous popcorn parties in which we would do read throughs of the script. It was pretty much my way of bribing them into being a part of the show.
Wow, you got read throughs. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we would put the shows up in the neighborhood, and I would go around and charge, I don't know, like 25 cents a ticket.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where it all started. Then I went into Wilmington and I auditioned for Michelle Reeve.
Okay.
She was doing Babes in Toyland, and from there forward, I was hooked. I was doing every show I could possibly do.
All right. So, talk to me about you went to, obviously, it brought you to the North Carolina School of the Arts, which is an amazing place to go to learn and develop as an artist. So, what did you do directly after that? Like, what was you finished and you went, okay, where am I going now?
So, um, my original plan was, as the is the plan for every person who's graduating from some conservatory. I'm going to go to New York City and I'm going to do all of these things. But in my senior year of college, the day after I brought uh, the graduation tickets, to be exact, my father unexpectedly died.
Okay.
And so I had no clue that that would change the course of what I had planned to do, because my mother was taking it very hard. And anybody who knows me knows that I am clearly a mama's boy. I
Okay.
still am. She's passed away, but I still am a mama's boy. Um, because everything she's taught me has literally carried me through my life. And I live by those principles. But I knew that she was taking it hard and she would be home alone. So I decided that it was more important for me to go back to where my mother was, to make sure that she was good, and to also understand, because life is fleeting. My father dying was unexpected. So I'm like, I really need to spend the time, as much time as possible, with my mother. So that's what happened when I left. I actually had no plans when I left to start a company. That just came a year later.
Okay. And so am I assuming correctly that some of the working with the artists like Camille Brown and stuff like that, those were earlier in your career, or was that more recently?
Yes. That was so some of them were recent and some of them were earlier. I got to work with Camille when I was at the school, and that's how I met her. Um, she is truly an inspiration. She is probably the first person at the school, or when she came as a guest artist, the first artist to make me believe that I could do it.
Hmm.
Right. She told me like her story was very similar to my experience at the school, which was, some was positive, but there was a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say negative, but, the way they taught then is very much different than what they do now.
Right.
And some of the things could be, hurtful.
Yeah.
Um, as a dancer there, someone who's coming from a rural town in Brunswick County, um, and being told no one wants to see a chocolate chunk on stage,
All right.
you kind of feel defeated.
Right. Well, you do also have some other influence, like I know for because I've worked with him as well, like Clay, working with Clay Taliaferro. I mean, I designed a couple of pieces for him early on in my career over at Duke, and I don't know how well you're really. I mean, I had a great. I that guy was great. I mean,
Oh yeah, he
I would work with
he
him
is
any day before he passed several years ago, but just a wonderful person.
he's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I just soaked up everything he said
Yeah.
because he was that kind of person, right? You wanted to know what he knew.
He was one of the first people I could tell you that made me make the connection between more the modern dance style and musical theater dance because like he choreographed one of the shows for the department. It was I want to say it was Ragtime or something like that, and it never like I was like, why are we using Clay for this? Like he's a modern dancer, he doesn't know anything about musical theater, and then he came out and did it, and I was like, oh, that was really great. That was fantastic. And then it just kind of reminded me of like all of these modern dancers that came from or went to musical theater. Twyla Tharp had a musical on Broadway with, the music of Billy Joel for a while. It's just, but also is well known in the modern dance community, for being who she is.
Right.
How does that help you and in your, you know, crossing over between the two? Because I know you do a little bit of this and both at times.
So I had the opposite path as our pioneers of modern dance, right? So like Twyla choreographed a Broadway show, but she was into modern dance
Right.
first.
Right.
I was the opposite. I was in the musical theater first,
Right.
and then I crossed into contemporary slash modern dance, and that was um, after a lot of research, right? Because I knew I wanted to go to the School of the Arts, and like the way I trained myself, my trajectory was I did my little shows at home,
Mhm.
right? And I did children's theater. Then I studied piano because my mom was like, Kevin, if you're going to get into this musical theater stuff, you got to know everything.
Right.
So I studied piano. So I was a classical pianist for a while.
Mhm.
Um, Judy Greenhut, so thankful for her. She allowed me to take dance lessons on a scholarship because we could not afford it at the time. And so I was exposed to musical theater dance through her. And then I did the musicals and voice lessons and acting lessons. But then
Right.
I was like, what's the one thing that I feel like I need to improve on more? And
Okay.
it was the dance. And so that's when I went to the School of the Arts and I was like, well, what's the best transition? Like, do I do ballet? Do I study ballet fully or do I study contemporary? And I learned that contemporary dance has more of a musical theater following because of its ability to tell stories through movement.
Okay.
And so that's how I got into that. And my contemporary dance does come through in musicals, and it's actually becoming more of a common thing, especially on Broadway now. There's a lot more contemporary dance fused into
Right.
musical theater.
Absolutely. I believe that fully. Absolutely. So when you talk to me about forming TECHMOJA back in 2008, 2008. Where'd that come from? Just so.
Oh, well, it was born out of kind of a rebellion. I'm not going to say which company, but I was directing a show for a company, a musical, very well known musical, and I needed to get well, they fought me on everything. They fought me on the costuming, they fought me on um I needed a gun,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I didn't want to use a sound cue because it wasn't as impactful. This was a very, to me, the gun was a very important character in the story.
Okay.
And so this gun needed to be able to fire off. Um, and, there's ways to do that, but they were dead set on wanting to use a sound cue. And so I just felt like I was constantly fighting. They were upset with my casting choices because I believed in diverse casting from the start. How dare I
Right.
cast a Black person in a role that is traditionally done as a white person? So I got into so much trouble with that. And so I said, Mama, I'm sick of this. I'm going to create a space where Black people and people of color can experience theater in a way that doesn't necessarily sensationalize the fact that we have them here, right? Like there's some companies that I feel like market diversity, but aren't truly diverse. They're just like, oh, look at us. We're doing a show that's all Black people. It's an all Black cast. Come see it. It's exotic. It's different for us. I didn't want that. I wanted a place where it was normal and it was naturalized and they didn't have to feel like they had to play the butler or whoever else in the musical, right?
So, and here's what I can say based on what I've seen on your website and what I've seen you post in the past, and I think this is great. It's not only just to me, it's not only just about making that space. It's you're celebrating the Black artists that are out there as well by doing shows that were written by Black artists as well, and those some of these are great, and doing shows like you said where you're putting a Black artist in a in a role that was not meant for them.
Right.
Clearly, there's no who cares. It doesn't matter to the script at all. It doesn't change anything, and that's what's the most impactful. It's like you have to sit down and realize it doesn't make a difference. It's just
Right.
read, listen to the words and listen and watch the performance, and you'll get the same message out of it. But at the same time, as I said, I think one of the important things that you're doing is mixing these things and making it normal. It,
Mhm.
and that's I think a fantastic thing you're doing. What was the first show you worked on it as TECHMOJA? What was the first? Was it a dance thing?
The very first, so the TECHMOJA that came from my dad.
Sorry,
So
right
no, you're fine. People say TECHMOJA all the time. It's cool.
about that.
um, my dad gave us the name, right? He said, Kevin, you should name your company TECHMOJA after your favorite forms of dance, technique, modern, and jazz.
Okay.
Because the company we were asked to do some sort of African American Black history program, and they wanted an 8-minute dance. So I choreographed a dance. We called ourselves that. So that was our first thing, but that was unofficial. We didn't have, the paperwork or anything. That was created in 2007 before he died.
Okay.
So then when I finally decided to do the company, I said, I'm going to keep the name. Even though it's a theater company and dance company, we're keeping the name.
Okay.
Um, and so the first thing we did was Dream Girls. And it had been done in Wilmington before, but it was early 90s.
Mhm.
And so it was the first time it was being done, and it was 2009.
Right.
And It was great. I mean, we didn't have much, right? We did it at the Hannah Block Second Street stage, so it was a much smaller, scaled down production. But it was essentially saying, we're here and this is the work we're going to do. I mean, we were inspired by the Willis Richardson players, right? Because I saw them as a child, and that was the first time I had saw someone who looked like me on the stage. And I was like, oh my gosh, we can do this. This is something we can do. And my mom thought that one of the ways to celebrate us getting older was every 5 years we would remount Dream Girls, but we would remount it. It would have to be completely different. The costuming would be different. The choreography would be different. The staging would be different, all that. And so that's what we did. So every 5 years we do it. It's actually coming up on the 5th year this year. So we'll be doing it in the fall.
Okay. It's such a
But
great
yeah.
show. I can tell you it's an important show for me. It's one of the first shows, one of the first national tours I worked on when I was in my 20s. I actually was where I worked as a dresser, believe it or not. First tour with Jennifer Holliday in it, and so we got to deal with Jennifer Holliday. Enough said. you know,
Love her.
uh, the reason they put me on as a dresser is because all of the gowns with all the sequins and stuff were so heavy. They needed somebody who could lift all of that stuff up onto a rack
Right.
and steam it all, and that was my job.
I did not know that. That is amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on that show. Because again, and I think because what you're doing with it, to the extent of changing it up, it's a show that lends itself to that. It's a show that allows you to take a little bit of license and go, okay, what do we do? We're tweaking this here in terms of intent and stuff like that. I think that's a
Mhm.
great choice for that. There's not a lot of shows that you can do that with. There are certain shows that it's like, yeah, no, you can't really change that. It's pretty much set in stone. But that's one of those ones that, because it's based on an idea of those girl groups of the 50s, there were so
Mhm.
many of them, and all of them had a different story. So you can kind of almost tell them like each of those different stories in a different way. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's such a great thing to do. Um, I want to go back and talk a little bit about your mom, because I can tell you she also had a great influence on my career. I don't know if you ever knew that, but when we first started out on with our company, Two Peas in a Pod, she was one of the first people that made me realize it's like, no, this is a business. You can't just, the art is great, but you also have to get somebody to pay for it. And
Right.
I'll never forget, because we were arguing with somebody at the art center about a show we wanted to do, and your mom was on the board with, and she looked at the board at one point. She's like, these people are paying us money. You need to let them use the space. Nobody else is paying us money. They are. And it was her advocating for my company, that in that way, that it touched me, that I was like, but not only is she doing this for me, but she's correct. We were bringing in income flow.
You
We were
were.
the only group doing that at the time. So it was
Mhm.
kind of shocking to get resistance, but she was definitely an advocate for not only the arts, but also for people doing this as a business, which I always appreciated. That was one of the great things for me, and she was a wonderful businesswoman. I can tell you that too.
Yeah, I wish I had half of what she had. I'm working on it. I'm getting there.
In the genes, so it should come naturally at some point. Um, what are talk to me about some of the things you're working on now. Other than, I know you mentioned Dream Girls, it's coming up, but what are you working on now? With
So we're looking at doing Jesus Christ Superstar. We're
okay,
looking at doing we are doing For Colored Girls, but we had some scheduling conflicts, so we just have to find new dates. Um, so For Colored Girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. Once on this island.
okay,
This is all running into 2026 too. And Choir Boy and the Scottsboro Boys.
okay. Let's start with that one, and let's talk a little bit about each of those. What's the motivation behind choosing that show?
The Scottsboro Boys?
Yeah, let's start with that one.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Wilmington has a very dark history.
Okay.
1898, in which it was the most successful coup in U.S. history, in which they massacred and took over the land of Black residents of the time. Um, and a lot of the remnants of that dark history exist still because the names of these people and the statues of these people exist in the city. They've actually removed some since and changed some names. But a lot of the families, the descendants of those families who, you know, started the coup, still live here. And even though we feel there's been progress, there's still situations where there are white led spaces in which we've been kept out of for years. And I've had to fight and kind of knock down and kick down the door to get into. And so I feel like the Scottsboro Boys, with its themes of, the historical story of the guys being falsely accused of raping a white woman or white women because they were just so happened to be on the same train, and using the vehicle of minstrelsy to
Okay.
tell that story, um, really resonates with the history of the city. And I think it will open the eyes and continue that conversation about, um, racial equity and the way we deal in the city with each other, and maybe enlighten and open the minds of some people. A lot of people do these things as a shock factor. It's not a shock factor for me. It's more of an education because there's that community educator part.
And that's important. It absolutely is important.
Right.
All right, we're going to call that part one of our interview with Kevin Levi Green of TECHMOJA. Please join us again next week for part two. And if you like what you've heard, please follow or subscribe. And we'll see you soon. Thank you and keep the faith.